How do you assess how critical this piece of land is if you do not assess it?
Can I change sides?
That's a bit high.
Yeah, 10% is a lot.
Yeah.
This auntie has a trolley and you can just put all your stuff in the trolley. I just don't understand why you still need a lot of plastic bags to put inside the trolley.
Would you grow your own produce for personal consumption or buy organic produce? Which would you choose?
We have this concept that's called urban farming in Singapore, where you just, on your balcony where you normally grow your plants and flowers, you just change them into maybe vegetables, your essential vegetables and your herbs. And I think that's actually, because seeds don't cost a lot of money and you just have to sort of, fertilize them and water them while, being friendly to the environment.
Personally, I think this whole sustainability problem it's not just the big manufacturer's problem. I think it's everyone's problem. Even though your individual efforts might seem insignificant on your own, but when they pile up, they can be a very considerable amount of force to change the whole course of climate discussion.
I would grow my own food because I think it feeds into the food security in Singapore. Because a lot of our food is already imported. We still need to import food from overseas, albeit more sustainably sourced, but the emissions per food dollar is still quite high because you have to transport it all the way to Singapore.
The environment is everybody's issue. It's not just the environmentalist issue, it's not just the government's issue. Literally every living being who is on the planet has to be concerned about climate change. This discussion will prompt a lot of more meaningful insights and trade-offs into how everybody thinks, and only when we bring our different perspectives and experiences and insights onto the same table are we able to have a more holistic discussion about climate change.
If I'm in the financial capacity to be able to support our local farmers, then that's what I should do. But that being said, I do think there is value in growing your own food. Because like what Docker said, it really connects you back to nature, at least from my own experience. And that's something that a lot of Singaporeans, I feel, have lost because of how fast-paced our society is. Yeah.
I agree.
So in 2018, I founded a ground-up initiative called Bring Your Own Bottle Singapore, which basically encourages people to use less plastic. And since then, I've branched out into exploring other issues as well, like inequality, climate change, and mental health. So I talk about all these issues regularly on my Instagram page at BYOBottleSG. And I think in all of these issues, there are always a lot of complexities and trade-offs involved, and I'm hoping today's discussion will bring some new perspectives.
Personally, I think I'm not a very environmentally conscious person, admittedly. I still have a lot of things that I wish to change. However, I actually have a podcast on the YouTube channel called Overthink, and I actually have a podcast named In My Opinion. And the whole reason why I started this podcast is to get opinions from other people and talk about causes and talk about important issues. And environmental problems and issues are definitely one of them. It's definitely one of them that I want to talk about. So I'm looking forward to hearing what everyone has to say.
Would you spend $94,000 on a gas vehicle, or would you spend $141,000 on an electric vehicle?
Oh no. Can not die?
I choose neither. I don't have money. So I feel like electric cars are just going to be more common in the future, and our infrastructure is just going to be built towards making owning electric cars more convenient in Singapore. And I think that is more that's indeed a more sustainable way forward, in terms of automobiles.
By 2030, Singapore is actually looking to expand the network of electric vehicle charging points to 60,000 points. Fun fact.
I mean, as a 20-year-old Singaporean, I am saving up for my future. I am trying to buy a house. I am trying to pay for my uni fees. I am trying to do so many things, and if I can get a cheaper car, I would. It just doesn't sit well with me that this was something I could prevent, but I didn't do it. Yeah.
For me, I'm thinking of, in today's context, Singapore, our electricity, most of it still comes from fossil fuels. And even when you have an electric car, you are still charging it with mostly natural gas. Yeah. And so I'm not really sure, like, when you compare the two, which one emits less carbon dioxide. Yeah.
Move over to that side then.
No, can I just say, but we're gonna have a lot more solar panels to the source of electricity is changing rapidly. I think as we're speaking, they're gonna have more solar panels and wind energy and everything to sort of make the source of electricity a lot cleaner than we actually have it now.
Singapore is looking to quadruple solar energy deployment by 2025, which is actually in 4 years.
Yeah, I'll stop.
Wow.
Wow.
I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm just gonna be here.
Even places like cars like Tesla and everything are just starting to be imported into Singapore. And even that is going to have its growing pains, which I don't think will be solvable within the next few years or foreseeable future. Like, for example, for Singaporeans, if you want to go, next time no COVID anymore, you want to go to JB or go Malaysia, right? You have to also be sure that Malaysia has a good enough electric car infrastructure.
So I'm going to give you a third option right now. So if you would choose rather to have no car forever in your life, you will never own a car, and you would choose to take public transport, you can step back to the center.
Bye guys. This is going to sound like the most first world problem ever, but bear with me, right? My house is super secluded. I'd rather get the extra 1 hour of sleep than take public transport and wake up an hour early.
Assuming you are a part of the Ministry of Sustainability and Environment in Singapore, would you aim for carbon neutral or carbon zero?
Yeah, so from a pragmatic standpoint, if we're talking about economic considerations, then I would guess that the government may venture to this side. But in my personal capacity, I would be standing there.
Most of our energy source is still reliant on fossil fuels and non-renewables. And even with the building of the solar farms, in I think in Tengah or in Bedok, the amount, and we even bought a solar farm in Australia, in order to divert all of its energy to Singapore. Even with all that combined, we're still quite far away from even having half of our energy resources be renewables.
I feel like you just wanna aim carbon neutral first, and that's already a very huge goal that a lot of governments in the world are struggling to achieve.
Do you think Singapore should reduce its economic growth in order to protect the environment? Yes and no. Which will you choose?
We as humans, we cannot see the long term, especially if the short term have such pressing needs that needs to be addressed. I'm thinking about all those people who are less well-to-do. They are probably struggling a little bit more economically or financially. I think they won't be really down for it, especially because they need to have things met now. And unfortunately, Singapore is such a small blimp in the whole world, right? That even if we decide that, hey, okay, let's just go carbon zero, and let's just start to impose all these restrictions on especially manufacturing plants and other big companies, especially gas companies or fuel companies, etc. They will just pack up their bags and just move to a neighboring country very near here that's willing to take them.
If we have to assume that pursuing sustainability necessarily leads to economic slowdown, then I feel it's going to be a global trend sooner or later. And Singapore being one of the richer countries, I think Singapore is one of those countries that can afford to start it sooner than most other countries.
When we talk about global trends, right, actually Netherlands, they have adopted something called the donut economy, which looks beyond just economic growth. So it takes into account like the whole of society's well-being and other different factors. So they are in a country that is more well-positioned to do that, I guess. And Singapore, I agree, is not at that stage yet, because for so long, GDP has been like our main measure of success and prosperity. I think something I resonate with very strongly is that infinite growth cannot happen on a planet with finite resources. Yeah.
Which would you choose? To charge $10 for a plastic bag, or $10, or 10 cents?
Last week, I was at the supermarket at the checkout counter. This auntie has a trolley, with the metal bars and everything. And you can just put all your stuff in the trolley and you can just go. I just don't understand why you still need a lot of plastic bags to put inside the trolley, because you don't need to carry them.
It does not deter people enough, I think, and it also sends the message that 10 cents is like something that you can consider because it's just a small amount. It's like compromisable, whereas $10 sends like a very serious message.
Can I change sides? Okay.
Why do you change sides?
So I'll explain my rationale of why I was there first. It's because I feel like if I'm thinking from a very pragmatic point of view, if you suddenly throw $10 to Singaporeans, the public backlash will be huge. It will turn a lot of people against the environmental movement. I cannot think of anyone who would want to pay $10 for a plastic bag. Yeah, and so that is what will kickstart the whole culture towards moving towards reusable.
You cannot think of these issues as like just within the people who really support you, because whether or not we like to believe it, more people are against this cause than supporting.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to think about their point of view of the cause if we do certain actions, or we say certain things, or we implement some policies. And Singapore, if there's one thing that we care, is about money. So, like even the GST rising from 7% to 9% caused such a big uproar and like such a big controversy. I think charging $10 for a plastic bag is going to polarize people more than is it going to bring them to the cause.
And they have this process called the environmental impact assessment, where they assess the sites to see whether or not it is something that they should retain or if they can develop it. Yeah. So with this understanding, right, would you choose to access every single site and increase CPF by 2%, or would you only access the critical ones?
That's a bit high.
Yeah, 2% is a lot.
Yeah.
I just want to say that this decision is making me feel extremely terrible. So, like, I definitely don't envy the government. I hope they are okay mentally, and like, I definitely don't want to be the government anytime soon. So, like, it's precisely because of decisions like this. As far as I know, the situation where like, the Kranji forests were cleared erroneously is a single happening incident. So it hasn't happened in the past. Someone please fact check me if I'm wrong. I don't think it's happened in the past. I don't see it happening in the future either. I feel like raising the 2% CPF or doing anything right now is a bit too premature. And the burden is going to be too much on the people to do these type of preventive measures.
Okay, before we continue, can I move over?
Wait a second, why? No.
Currently, EIAs are not mandatory, but there are a lot of, for a lot of projects, or actually for most projects, the government already voluntarily does it. From my perspective, it actually, it can be done without the additional cost on consumers.
I think it really comes down to priorities for me, as heartbreaking as it is to fork out my own money and also to ask the lower income to also fork out more money. I think EIAs and assessment should be a given in any development projects. It should not even be a question, because how do you assess how critical this piece of land is if you do not assess it?
It's not such a simple issue, because if the money were to come from the companies, then then Singapore might lose its competitive edge in attracting companies to, develop here.
Once again, I want to say that this is actually depressing. This is very depressing, and you start to realize that environmental problems are not just in isolation with yourself. Most people would agree that environmental problems are obviously something that we need to solve. It's important to also look at how the people who don't agree with the cause would view certain policies. And yeah, I don't think they're going to be very well if we do the 2% increase.
Now I just want to hear from you what your takeaways from this discussion were.
Okay, this was a very meaningful discussion in shedding light on how complicated it is to make environmental policies. And I think I do see now from probably the policymakers' perspective that not everything is so simple.
I think it's important to catch ourselves every time we say something like, of course this should be done, because we need to start thinking about the consequences and how it affects every other thing. And I think it will be foolish if we think of environmental causes or problems or any other problems to be fair in isolation by itself.
It's very easy to say, oh yeah, I understand there are trade-offs that have to be made, but when you actually force me to make a decision, like 10 cents versus $10, then it really changes the whole game. And I have a lot more insight into how difficult the policymakers' role is.
The main takeaway from this conversation I have is that we need to have more conversations with environmentalists and also people who are apathetic and also people who are know about the cause but don't act on it. When all of these voices come together, then we can create a very meaningful solution.
Alright, perfect. Okay, thank you everyone. We're good. Now let's everyone